This is the workshop for the Dynamic Coalition on Access and Connectivity for Remote, Rural and Dispersed Communities. The Dynamic Coalition was formed as an outcome of IGF Athens, essentially to consider issues surrounding communities which are actually spread out all over the world. For instance, in the north of Europe, the north of the Americas, south of the Americas, the Pacific and Asia. This morning we have two parts to this workshop. The first part is a presentation by Anna Anderson from Imagining the Internet. Some of you may be aware of their research project last year, or survey project last year, and I understand you're doing the same thing again this year at IGF Rio. Following Jana's presentation will be Dr. Surf, speaking about access and connectivity and how it relates to IG issues. Following that, we will move into a short panel discussion with Dr. Surf, Mr. Gunnar Hökmark from Sweden, who is a member of the European Parliament, and Mr. Haqiqur Rahman from ISOC Bangladesh. The panel discussion itself will center around access and connectivity and the role of governments, the private sector, and civil society, and how they can all help to make it work in terms of digital inclusion. So, without wasting more time, Jana, thank you.
Good morning. More than 80% of the world is not connected. I'm sure I don't have to preach that to the people in this room. They're not online, and we're here today to talk about access and connection as a right. We want to bring everyone in the world the connection that we have experienced and we get enthusiastic about. This dynamic coalition is aimed at tackling connectivity issues and the challenges facing remote, rural, and dispersed communities. I represent Imagining the Internet. It's a global good initiative of Elon University and the Pew Charitable Trust, the Pew Internet Project, and our work is to illuminate people's hopes and fears in a way that will inform and help guide the future of communications policy. We conduct surveys and we do video interviews of people's opinions. We collect the data and we share it online at imaginingtheinternet.org. And I will start our session by showing a few minutes of the documentary that we made from interviews at the first IGF in Athens.
In order to have a successful portion of internet operating, certain infrastructure has to be in place. This has come up a couple of times in the meetings here already. One of them is power. It's very helpful to have electrical power available if you're going to use computers and communication. But it can come in a variety of forms. Solar power is often one of the best choices if you're in a place where you don't have any other conventional power generation capability. Ordinary generators using various kinds of fuels can help. People have gone to the trouble with recharging batteries using automobiles that are propped up on blocks and simply run the generators and recharge the batteries. So there are a variety of ways of obtaining power if you don't have grid power available. You also need to have some trained staff who know how to assemble and operate and debug software and hardware systems. And you need other kinds of facilities, and in particular you need some kind of communications in order to get access to the internet in the first place. Here's an area where it can be quite difficult in rural parts of the world, in very isolated parts of the world. Finding affordable access is a very tough proposition. I was confronted with this problem very dramatically in a visit to the Pacific Islands. I was in Kiribati a few years ago at the invitation of the Pacific Internet Society chapter. And it was very clear that there weren't a whole lot of options for getting access to the internet other than satellite for that particular community. That's true of a number of the islands, and it's also true in other parts of the world. The problem is that satellite capacity is expensive. It occurred to me at the time, and it continues to be a theme of mine, that cooperation and collaboration in the acquisition of satellite-based communications could turn out to be financially advantageous. So what we need is to see bulk buys, collaborative bulk buys of communications capacity, so as to drive down the per unit cost That requires cooperation sometimes over international boundaries. The same could be said, by the way, for infrastructure that's internal to a region. For many years in South America, for example, almost every country that had access to the internet had satellite connections to Miami. And in order to send information from one country to another in South America, you actually sent it up to Miami and back and came back again. Building infrastructure within the region is another way of, of sharing costs and reducing some of the expense. So again, I would argue that it's important for regional collaboration in order to make some of these things possible. But probably the most important thing, in addition to all these other specific elements, is the construction of a self-sustaining business model. If you don't have a self-sustaining model, then whatever project you have in mind is going to die after the funds stop flowing. And I can't tell you how important it is and how disappointing it can be to put something in place and have it operate for a few years and then discover that it is not sustainable and whatever benefit was available to the local population evaporates. And it's almost worse to start a project like that, make things available temporarily and then have it go away than not to have it at all. So one of the things that I believe to be absolutely critical in trying to initiate projects like this is to make sure that you have all of the pieces in place, including a sustainable business model. Sometimes that translates into things like internet cafes. Sometimes it translates into university settings where the facilities are made available to the public in addition to the local students. But in any event, it needs to be thought through so that the costs can be borne by a business model that produces enough revenue. Just two other observations to make. One of them is that we should be careful not to imagine that there is a single uniform solution to putting internet in place or putting internet access in place. It's going to vary depending on the local conditions. There are going to be some places where mobiles turn out to be the first and most effective way of getting access to the internet. There may be constraints associated with using the internet through a mobile. The display screens are often fairly small, the keyboards are difficult, but mobile technology is much more rapidly propagating right now than anything else. And so we should take advantage of that. In other cases, we're going to find that we have laptops available, for example, the One Laptop Per Child program, which, by the way, has triggered other efforts by the commercial sector to build lower and lower cost equipment. That's a good thing because as the prices come down, they become more affordable and within reach for people whose incomes are more matched to less expensive equipment. So in some sense, the force is with us here. The costs are coming down thanks to competition and improved technology. And finally, the whole point of having access to the internet is to get access to information or to enable business to be conducted in a way that it couldn't before. If you don't have content that's useful to you, it's not very helpful to be online. So one of the big problems is to make sure that there is useful local content or locally useful content that is in a locally accessible language. This is not something that the outside world can do. This is something that you have to do for yourself. And so part of the challenge in making internet useful is to create content that people, in fact, will be able to take advantage of. And so I can't emphasize more strongly how vital it is that any local population that is not yet on the internet needs to think through or be helped to think through what content would be useful. And I'm sure that we'll find lots of examples probably in the course of this discussion. So the simple summary here is that it's possible to build pieces of internet. It's possible to operate those pieces, but you have to do it in a way that's self-sustaining, and you have to make sure that there is content that people can use. And that's my simple summary. I hope that everybody walks out of this room with an idea for how to get more people up online on the internet. That's what one of the Millennium Development Goals is about, and that's what we should all be trying to make happen.